6.5, Performing Function Operations. So in this section, we are going to be taking different functions and multiplying them, dividing them, and all of that other stuff. We're performing multiple operations. So looking at this core concept, please make sure you write all of this down. If we're looking at addition, function addition, then if it says f plus g of x, that just means I'm taking my f of x function and adding my g of x function. So for example, if f of x is 5x and g of x is x plus 2, it says f plus g of x. I'm going to take that 5x, and then I'm going to take that x plus 2, and I'm going to add them together. So 5x plus another x is 6x, and then there's my plus 2. The same thing goes with subtraction. If it says f minus g of x, that just means f of x minus g of x. So there's an example of that there as well. Multiplication, f times g of x just means f of x times g of x. So you're going to write down, in this case, 5x times x plus 2, and simplify that. Division, if it says f divided by g of x, then you have f of x divided by g of x. So in this case, we would have 5x divided by x plus 2. In the subtraction, just to look back at that, 5x minus x plus 2, you have to distribute that negative. So 5x minus x is 4x, and then minus 2, because you have to distribute the negative on. So let's look at an example now. Example 1. In example 1, it says that f of x is equal to 3 square roots of x, and g of x is equal to negative 10 square roots of x. I need to find f plus g of x and state the domain. Then evaluate the sum when x is equal to 4. So there's 3 things I need to do here. So let's start at the beginning of it. And if I have f plus g of x, then here we go, f plus g of x just means that I'm going to have f of x plus g of x. So what is the f of x function? Well, it's right here, 3 square root of x plus my g of x function is negative 10 square root of x. So now, whenever I add those together, I get f plus g of x is equal to, well, 3 plus negative 10 is negative 7 times the square root of x. Okay? When you graph this, you're going to graph to check your domain. You don't have to draw the graph, just put it in your calculator. So if we were to look at a calculator, and this one's going to take a little bit. All right, so let's see here. Let's plug that into the calculator, negative 7 square root of x So it goes to the right. I'm just looking at the domain, not the range, but it goes from 0 over to the right. So that tells me that my domain is going to be x is greater than or equal to 0 because it starts at 0 and goes to the right. Now it says evaluate the sum when x is equal to 4. So to do that, we have f plus g of 4. That just means that we're going to plug in a 4. So I've got negative 7 times the square root of 4. Work that out. F plus g of 4 is going to be, and you can just plug this right side into your calculator. Negative 7 times the square root of 4, and that's going to be negative 14. Go back and make sure you highlight your answers. So there's one answer there. There's an answer there. And the third answer. So we have the function, we have the domain, and we have where we evaluated the function. All right, example 2. Let f of x equal 3x cubed minus 2x squared plus 5, and g of x equals x cubed minus 3x squared plus 4x minus 2. Find f minus g of x, state the domain, and then evaluate the difference when x equals negative 2. So, let's get started on that. We have f minus g of x, which just means we're going to have f of x minus g of x. So, write down your f of x function, 3x cubed minus 2x squared plus 5 minus, in parentheses, x cubed minus 3x squared plus 4x minus 2, and that's from that g of x function right up here. Now, go ahead and we're going to distribute that negative sign. So we have 3x cubed minus 2x squared plus 5. Then, when we distribute the negative, negative times x cubed is negative x cubed. Negative times negative 3x is positive 3x squared. Negative times 4x is negative 4x. And negative times negative 2 is positive 2. Now we can go back and combine our like terms. So if I have 3x cubed and negative x cubed, that is going to give me 2x cubed. If I have negative 2x squared and positive 3x squared, that's going to give me a positive 1x squared, or just positive x squared. Now, this goes straight to 5, but I have an x term down here, so that x term right there is negative 4x. Then I can come back and get my 5 plus my 2, which is going to give me a positive 7. So I have f minus g of x is equal to 2x cubed plus x squared minus 4 plus 7. All right, finding the domain of that, let's plug that in our calculator. So we're going to delete what's there. Press tab, we're going to put in a new function. 2x cubed plus x squared minus 4x plus 7. Press enter. And if we were to zoom out, we would see that it goes on, up, and down, and back up. It keeps on going gradually wider to the left and gradually wider to the right. So our domain there is all real numbers. So we have our domain, all real numbers. Okay, and the last thing is to evaluate. It says evaluate the difference when x equals negative 2. So we have f minus g of negative 2, which just means we are plugging negative 2 in for every x. So we have 2 times negative 2 cubed plus negative 2 squared minus 4 times negative 2 plus 7. And again, you can just plug that directly into your calculator to eliminate, make sure that's a minus sign there, to eliminate as much error as possible. So when we do that, plugging this into our calculator, we have 2 times negative 2, oh, I put the dot, I'm sorry, negative 2, that is cubed, plus parentheses negative 2 squared minus 4. So again, you're negative 2, so times negative 2 plus 7. And when you do, you get 3. So that is equal to 3. So we've already highlighted our function, highlight the domain, and highlight where you evaluated it. Okay, let's look at example 3. We have f of x equals x squared, and g of x equals the square root of x. We need to find f times g of x, state the domain, and evaluate the product when x equals 9. So here we go. F times g of x is simply f of x times g of x. Right? So f of x is x squared times g of x is the square root of x. So when we do that, it's hard to multiply those two things because I have one that has an exponent and one that has a square root. So let's change them both to be the same. So I'm going to change that square root, the radical, to be an exponent. So now I've got x squared times x to the 1/2, because a 1/2 power is the same as a square root. Now that I have the same basis, I can add my exponents, and I've got x to the 2 plus 1/2. When you add that, you're going to get x to the 5 over 2. So we have f times g of x is equal to x to the 5 over 2 power. And we're going to leave it just like that. So now we need to go and get the domain for that. Let's go back to our graph, delete what is there, press tab, and we have x, if it'll work for me, there we go, x raised to the 5 divided by 2, enter, and there's our function. So it goes up and to the right. Going to the right is what we need. It starts at 0, so it's greater than or equal to 0. So here's our domain, where x is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, now we have to evaluate, and it said to evaluate the product when x is 9. So we have f times g of x equals, oops, sorry, that right there should be an eraser. What's going on? Okay, try again. Here we go. We have crazy stuff going on. Okay, well, I guess we're just going to go with it. We have f times g of 9, and that's going to be equal to 9 to the 5 over 2. So whenever you put that in your calculator, we get f times g of 9 is going to equal, so let's put that in the calculator, on the calculation screen, 9 raised to the 5 over 2, and we get 243. So there we go, 243. And highlight that. We have our domain here, and f times g of 9 is 243. And moving on to our last example. F of x is 6x, and g of x is x to the 3/4. We need to find f divided by g of x, state the domain, and evaluate the quotient when x is 16. So here we go. F divided by g of x is simply f of x divided by g of x. So when we write that out, we will have 6x divided by x to the 3 over 4. Now, remember, when you're dividing bases, you are subtracting exponents. So if that x on the top has a 1, then I can rewrite that as 6 times x to the 1 minus 3 over 4 because I subtract my exponent. 1 minus 3/4 is going to leave me with 6x to the 1/4. So we have f divided by g of x is 6x to the 1/4. Let's go find our domain. Plug it in our calculator here. Let's delete what's there. And press tab. 6x raised to the 1/4 power. It goes up and to the right, so x is greater than or equal to 0, because 0 is where it started. Now it said to evaluate when x is 16. So we have f divided by g of 16 is going to be 6 times 16 to the 1/4. Let's plug that into the calculator. So we have 6 times 16 to the 1/4, and that gives us 12. So our answer here is f divided by g of 16 is 12. Let's go back and highlight. So there's where we evaluated. Here is our domain, and here is our function. And there we go.